This is Kirtop with you, and these are 100 discoveries from deserts and oases that shouldn't exist. A man-made giant under the ice. Under the thick Antarctic ice at a depth of several kilometers, scientists have detected a structure that cannot be accidental. It stretches for 300 kilometers, has a geometrically precise shape, and its density is comparable to metal. Nature does not create objects like this. The discovery was made by an international team led by geophysicist Andrew Carlson. Satellite data and radar revealed something that resembles either an artificial structure or an unknown catastrophe from past eras. The scientist himself admits that this could change everything we know about our planet. There are many theories. It could be a ship, a city, or a natural anomaly that shouldn't exist. Some suggest that it might be the remains of a prehistoric or extraterrestrial civilization. Drilling is not possible yet, but a new expedition is being prepared. If it is approved, we might touch for the first time what has been lying silent under the ice all these years. Lost cities in the Sahara. In old satellite images of the Sahara, in areas where there seemed to be nothing, strange outlines began to appear. Straight lines, squares, sometimes semicircles, as if they were the bases of domes. At first, scientists attributed this to geology, but when the shapes started repeating, it became clear. This was not nature. Many of these phantom structures are in southwest Egypt's Gilf Kabir, now just sand, but once possibly home to entire settlements. And not Bedouin ones, but stone, proportional, with remnants of walls. A grid of streets can be made out. Right now, these sites are buried. No one is excavating them. The local tribes insist it's better not to go there. They say those are forgotten places left by those who came before the sun. The year is 1900. Greece. The sea. In April 1900, a group of Greek sponge divers was working near the island of Antikythera when a storm forced them to drop anchor near some underwater rocks. During one of the dives, the diver Elias Stadiatis surfaced in a panic. He reported that there were dead people lying on the seabed. It was later discovered that these were bronze statues lying next to the wreckage of a Roman merchant ship that sank around 60 to 70 BC. The excavations continued until 1901, and among the amphorae, coins, and sculptures, a corroded bronze fragment was recovered, which at the time was of no interest, and was sent to the museum as an ordinary piece of debris. It was only in 1902 that the archaeologist Valerius Tice noticed a gear wheel inside the fragment, something that should not have been present in any ancient artifact. Further research showed that there were at least 37 gears with precise geometry inside, assembled into a complex system of mechanisms. In 1951, the physicist Derek DeSolo Price conducted an X-ray study of the mechanism and proved that the device was used to calculate the movements of the sun, moon, and planets, as well as to predict eclipses using the 19-year Metonic cycle. In 2005, tomography confirmed the presence of scales, inscriptions, and complex mathematical relationships that would have been impossible to produce by handcraft. The mechanism is over 2,000 years old, and its level of precision corresponds to 16th century engineering, not antiquity. And this is the first recorded find that is officially recognized and studied, yet it doesn't fit into its era at all, because nothing similar appears in history for another 1,500 years. A coin that looks like a medal. What you see is not just money, it's a decadrachm, a coin from ancient Greece worth 10 drachmas. It weighs about 43 grams and is almost the size of a modern medal. Its purpose is also closer to that of a medal than to regular money. These coins weren't used in markets. They were minted for special occasions, like war victories, offerings to the gods, or as commemorative tokens. This image features the nymph Arethusa wearing a laurel wreath, earrings, and a fine chain around her neck, surrounded by 4 dolphins. They move in a circle, protecting her or swirling like waves near the shore. This coin was minted in Syracuse, where the cult of Arethusa was especially significant. According to the myth, the nymph escaped from Alpheus and turned into an underground spring that emerges on the shores of Sicily. And nearby are the sea, dolphins, and the city that celebrated its victory through beauty. Decadrachms were rarely minted usually as a special issue, and were hardly ever used. They were gifted, kept, and sometimes buried. Few specimens survive today, and each of them is not just an artifact. It is a memory carved in silver, a reminder that money was once closer to ritual than to the market. Miniature figurines from the past. These figurines, the golden ram and the stone lion, were found in a tomb at the Gonur Tepe archaeological site in Turkmenistan. Their age is impressive. They date back to the period from 2400 to 1600 BC. Gonur Tepe is considered the heart of the mysterious Margiana civilization, which flourished in Central Asia and left behind many artifacts. The size of the figurines is astonishing. They literally fit on the tip of a finger, which speaks to the incredible skill of ancient jewelers. The golden ram symbolized wealth and abundance, while the stone lion represented strength and power. They were probably part of the burial inventory, meant to accompany the deceased into the afterlife and serve as amulets. Such findings confirm the high level of craftsmanship and the developed culture of Margiana. The craftsmen of that time were skilled not only in working with gold, but also with semi-precious stones, creating unique items. Today, these figurines are valuable artifacts. They lift the veil of mystery over the vanished civilization. Remains of a human over 1 million years old. Archaeologists discovered unique remains of an ancient human in the Spanish cave, Cima del Elefante, who lived about 1.4 million years ago. The discovered skull fragment is the oldest ever found in Western Europe and represents a human species previously unknown to science. Scientists found part of a face nicknamed Pink, after Pink Floyd, with the left cheek and upper jaw with teeth preserved. According to experts, this ancient human was very different from the later inhabitants of the region, known as Homo antecessor. For example, Pink had a flatter nose shape, more similar to Homo erectus, the first species that left Africa about 1,800,000 years ago. At that time, the climate of Europe was much milder, and the valleys in the Cima del Elefante area were covered with dense forests and inhabited by hippos, bison, and giants. In 1936, Iraq, Baghdad. In 1930, during excavations near Baghdad, archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig discovered strange ceramic vessels about 14 centimeters tall, inside of which were copper cylinders and iron rods insulated with bitumen. These objects were found in layers dated to around the 1st and 3rd centuries AD, during the Parthian Empire, and they did not resemble vessels, tools, or ritual objects. Koenig described the find and drew attention to one detail that could not be explained by chance. If you fill the vessel with an acidic solution, an electric voltage arises between the iron and the copper. The simplest reconstruction produced between 0.5 and 1 volt, exactly as much as a galvanic cell generates. In the 1940s, German and American researchers repeated the experiment and got the same result, confirming that the design really works as a battery. The official explanation sounded simple. These could have been vessels for storing scrolls or ritual objects. But the problem is that the bitumen insulation, metal electrodes, and the way they were assembled make no sense in a ritual or everyday context. Yet they perfectly match the principle of a galvanic cell, which Alessandro Volta only discovered in 1800. Moreover, traces of electroplating were found on the surface of some metal objects from the same region, which cannot be done without a source of electricity. These vessels are officially kept in museums, described in catalogs, and recognized as authentic, but their purpose has not yet been explained, because any straightforward explanation would disrupt the usual narrative of technological development. If people in the 1st century AD used electricity, even in its simplest form, then a question arises that history prefers to avoid. Where did this knowledge disappear to? And why was there no further development, no traces, and no continuation after it? An example of the mysterious blue. This is not just an ornament. It's a bracelet from Tutankhamun's tomb, over 3,300 years old. A lapis lazuli scarab, framed with carnelian, turquoise, and gold, embodying the idea of eternal transformation. The Egyptians believed that the scarab rolled the sun across the sky like a ball, so it symbolized renewal, protection, and the transition between worlds. But it's not just the shape that's important. It's also the color. This is a rich, almost glowing blue, not a paint, but Egyptian blue, the first synthetic pigment in history, which the Egyptians created nearly 2,000 years before Christ. Modern scientists are only now beginning to understand how complex the technology behind its creation was. A brewery from the time of Egypt's first rulers. Archaeologists have discovered the world's oldest brewery, located in the necropolis of Abydos, Egypt. This discovery not only sheds light on early brewing technologies, but also helps us understand how resources were managed during construction. The complex consists of 8 massive installations up to 20 meters long, each containing 2 rows of 40 vessels that were used to heat a mixture of grain and water. The classic beer brewing process. Scientists date the brewery to the era of Pharaoh Narmer, who is considered the founder of the first dynasty. Dr. Adams, who led the research, called this discovery an industrial-scale production and noted that it shows a high level of labor organization in ancient Egypt. The ability to manage the brewery with large-scale resource distribution and organize the workforce allowed the Egyptians to build grand structures, including the pyramids. In addition, beer played an important role in rituals. Large-scale production in Abydos indicates its use in sacrifices, ceremonies, and rituals, which confirms its significance in the development of Egyptian royal power. Stone tools in Dagestan. Archaeological discoveries have been made in Dagestan that significantly expand our understanding of ancient human history. The main focus of the research was the ancient sites Mukai I and Mukai II located along the ancient riverbeds. Stone tools were found here, which are millions of years old. The discoveries at the Mukai I site attracted particular attention. Among them were flat picks, bifacial choppers, and other tools similar to those found at the Ainakab I site. These finds date back to the period between 1.95 and 1.78 million years ago, making them some of the oldest in Russia. The tools found at Mukai I indicate a high level of technology among ancient people. They used stone flakes to create chopping and cutting implements. However, unlike similar finds in East Africa, no hand axes were discovered here, which may indicate unique technologies characteristic of this part of the world. The giant tools weighing 11 to 13 pounds are also of interest. According to scientists, they were used for breaking bones and skulls in order to extract bone marrow. Such tools are found at sites where ancient people processed their game. Year 415, India, Delhi. In the center of Delhi stands an iron pillar more than 7 meters tall and weighing about 6 tons. Erected around the year 415 AD during the reign of Emperor Chandragupta II, it has stood in the open air for more than 1,500 years. It has survived monsoons, heat, dust storms, and the passing of dozens of eras. But at the same time, it is almost free of rust, even though it is made not of stainless steel but of pure iron. Analysis of the metal showed that the column contains a high percentage of phosphorus and almost no sulfur or manganese, which creates a protective film that prevents corrosion. But modern industrial metallurgy has only been able to partially replicate this effect so far. Moreover, the column was not cast but forged from multiple pieces of iron welded into a single monolith, which requires precise temperature control and hammering, impossible without an advanced technological tradition. According to the official version, in the 4th and 5th centuries, iron was produced in small furnaces suitable for simple tools and weapons, but not for creating 6-ton structures that remain resistant to corrosion for 1,500 years. Nevertheless, the column stands, its composition has been studied, its date confirmed, and it is not a legend or a disputed artifact, but a recognized monument that you can touch with your own hands. The strangest part comes next. The technology that enabled creation of this metal was never further developed or scaled up. In India, there is no series of similar columns, no metallurgical school emerges, and there are no recorded transitional forms or attempts to repeat the success. It's as if the knowledge appeared at a single point, was applied once and then disappeared, leaving behind an object that fits neither the technological level of the era nor the logic of its development. And this is already the 3rd consecutive case where technology appears ahead of its time and disappears without a trace, leaving behind neither a line of progress nor a chain of development. nor an explanation that could settle the question. Scrolls and artificial intelligence. Thousands of fragments of text were found in the caves of Qumran. Many of them are biblical, some are unknown. But now, decades after their discovery, science is saying something no one expected. These scrolls may not have just been written in that era. Some of them date back to the lifetimes of the supposed authors of the Old Testament themselves. A team of researchers from the University of Groningen cleaned the castor oil from the manuscripts, which was used during conservation, and the team conducted radiocarbon analysis again. As a result, it turned out that many of the texts are much older than previously thought. Some are dated to the time of Ecclesiastes, others to the era of the prophet Daniel. Even more intriguing is Enoch, an AI trained on ink structure and writing traces, rather than radiocarbon dating. It determined the dating of the fragments with up to 85% accuracy without damaging the parchment. Moreover, it discovered graphic similarities that had previously been ignored. The overlay of styles, the intersection of eras and handwritings. This means that we can not only read these texts, but we can also follow the hand that wrote them, understand when, where, and possibly even by whom. Skulls with nails. In the southeast of Spain, among the ruins of ancient settlements, archaeologists found something that immediately causes disturbing feelings. 7 severed heads, some of which have huge metal nails driven into them, not through, but with obvious force, as if the skulls were nailed to something. But why? At first they thought they were war trophies, that the heads of enemies were displayed to intimidate others. But chemical analysis of the bones gave an unexpected result. Not all the skulls belonged to outsiders. In one of the cities, 3 out of 4 heads belonged to people who came from afar, while in another almost all turned out to be locals. And that changes everything. Because in one place, it seems that outsiders were really executed and put on display, while in the other, their own ancestors were kept as relics. The heads were found near houses, inside the dwellings. So this is no longer a demonstration, not a demonstration of power. It is memory and respect. The Greeks wrote that the Gauls kept the heads of their enemies in boxes, and Spanish mercenaries carried them on spears. But in reality, everything was more complicated. A hidden secret of the past. Recently, a team of Russian scientists led by the crystallographer from St. Petersburg State University deciphered the structure of one of the rarest minerals on the planet, uramphite. This unusual mineral was first discovered 70 years ago at the secret uranium deposit Turakawak in Kyrgyzstan. But at that time, its detailed structure could not be revealed. And recently, luck smiled on the scientists again. They found uramphite at the Russian Beshtau deposit in the Stavropol region. Uramphite belongs to the uranium micas and contains ammonium. This mineral has a bright luminescence and was previously used in photography. But despite numerous attempts to study it, its exact structure remained a mystery until 2023. Thanks to the latest equipment, scientists were able to study crystals just a few millimeters in size and detail. The mineral turned out to be unstable, so finding a quality specimen is real luck. Only 11 uranium minerals with ammonium are known. Most of them were found in the United States, where ammonium is formed from organic matter, for example, from decomposed animal remains. 1st century BC Rome. In the 1st century BC, the Romans began to build things that modern engineering still studies with amazement and frustration. Because these structures survived earthquakes, floods, and 2,000 years of erosion, while modern counterparts fall apart in just a few decades. We're talking about Roman concrete, a material that was used for ports, breakwaters, domes, aqueducts, and massive public buildings, many of which are still standing and functional today. Unlike modern concrete, the Roman mixture contained volcanic ash, lime, and seawater, and it was this combination that triggered chemical processes, which over time didn't destroy the material but actually made it stronger. In 2017, researchers at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology confirmed that crystals of tobermorite and phillipsite form in the structure of ancient concrete, filling micro cracks and preventing further destruction, creating a self-healing effect that is unavailable in most modern mixtures. The problem is that after the fall of the Roman Empire, the recipe for this concrete disappeared completely. Medieval builders no longer used this technology, ports were destroyed, domes collapsed, and concrete was only reinvented in the 19th century, but without the ability to self-heal. There is no technological continuity between Roman ports, which have stood for 2,000 years, and modern embankments, which are designed to last 50 to 70 years, as if the knowledge was completely lost rather than gradually forgotten. Archaeological and chemical analyses do not question either the composition or the age of Roman concrete, and its properties are officially recognized. It's impossible to explain why this technology vanished for 1,500 years without admitting the ancient world's technical level was higher than commonly thought. This is another case where knowledge does not evolve, but is interrupted, leaving behind a trace that we still cannot fully replicate, despite modern science and industry. Desert tunnels leading nowhere. There is a place in Egypt where tourists are not allowed, not because it is dangerous, but because there are too many questions. One of these areas is located just south of the Giza complex. Beneath a layer of sand lies a network of tunnels, either filled in and forgotten or deliberately buried. For decades, locals have spoken about empty halls beneath the sand, where you can hear echoes, feel drafts, and even smell scents, as if there is air underground. But officially, there is nothing there, and anything that was accidentally discovered was quickly buried again. In the 2010s, a group of researchers received a rare permit for ground-penetrating radar scanning and discovered long, straight structures beneath the surface, possibly corridors, some with turns. The length is tens of meters. The depth is about 5 meters. All ran parallel to the main axis of the plateau. But once the data hit the press, the work permit was revoked. Cameras were removed and the sand replaced. There are photos showing that some of the passages began in crevices among the old ruins, stone ramps, steps as if leading down. All of this was roughly sealed with cement and bricks. On one of these walls, someone scratched the word silenced in English with a nail. No one knows who wrote it. But too much points to the fact that Egypt is not what lies on the surface, but what is beneath it. And it's very important to someone that we don't go down there. The death of Alexander. Alexander the Great conquered half the world by the age of 30. His army marched from Greece to India. He never lost a single battle. He destroyed empires and created new ones. But in 323 BC, at the height of his power, he suddenly dies in Babylon. He was only 32 years old. What happened? There are many theories. The Persians said it was punishment for desecrating the tomb of King Cyrus. The Macedonians believed he simply wore himself out. Drinking, illness, exhaustion. Roman historians thought he was poisoned. There is a theory that it was malaria or West Nile fever, or an autoimmune disease, or a slow-acting poison brought from the east. But the biggest mystery is not the cause of death, but what happened afterward. Where is his body? According to one version, the sarcophagus was taken to Egypt. According to another, it never made it there. After that, the trail is lost. No tomb, no inscription, no burial. For the ancient world, this is almost an impossible absurdity. A person like that should have been deified, but instead, silence. Some suggest that the body was hidden on purpose, so as not to fuel a cult, to avoid giving legitimacy to his heirs, or because his death was part of a conspiracy, and someone wanted to erase all traces. Sometimes the most terrifying secret is not how a person lived, but how he left. Alexander was left with glory, cities bearing his name, and a myth. But there was no final point. No cross, no mausoleum. Only speculation. And that makes his death even more legendary and unsettling. Charred loaves of bread. These charred loaves of bread were found in Pompeii and Herculaneum, cities destroyed by the eruption of Vesuvius in 79 AD. Thanks to the layer of ash and high temperature, the bread was essentially sealed in time. Not only the shapes were preserved, but also the characteristic cuts that were made for easy portioning. This type of bread was called panis quadratus, and it was popular among the Romans. Interestingly, some of the loaves even have bakery stamps on them, something like ancient Roman logos. This indicates a developed trade and a system for regulating product quality. In Pompeii, archaeologists found entire bakeries with stone ovens, mills, and even remnants of flour, which gives us an idea of how lively life was in this prosperous city. Findings like these let us directly experience daily life in ancient Rome, revealing what people ate and how they lived. Bread was a key part of the Roman diet. and its survival in this form today is a remarkable archaeological discovery. Today, these charred loaves are in museums, reminding us of the ancient world's tragedies and grandeur. The metal rod. How can we explain this mysterious artifact? Inside a stone found in the Chinese Mazong Mountains, collector Jiling Wang discovered a metal rod with threads resembling a screw. But what's most strange is that solid rock formed around it, which suggests that the find could be millions of years old. Some have suggested that it's a meteorite with an alien artifact inside. Others believe that it's an ancient man-made object that, for unknown reasons, ended up in the ground and turned into a fossil. Skeptics, on the other hand, believe that it's just a rare natural formation, and the screw is simply a fossilized marine organism. But the most interesting thing is that similar discoveries have already been found in different parts of the world. Coincidence or evidence of an ancient, unknown technology? For now, this artifact remains one of the most mysterious archaeological puzzles. Board game Gnosos. The rules of this game have been lost to time, and to this day no one knows how it was played. This artifact was discovered during the excavation of the Knossos Palace by the British archaeologist Arthur Evans. Knossos, located on the island of Crete, is considered one of the oldest cities in Europe, and the game that was found dates back to around 1600 BC. Made from precious materials such as ivory, crystal, glass, gold, and silver, the game was not only expensive entertainment, and possibly it was also a symbol of its owner's high status. Archaeologists suggest that the game could have been used not only for entertainment, but also for rituals or divination. Some researchers even hypothesize that the intricate patterns on the game board may contain astronomical or mystical elements, which attracts the interest of supporters of the theory about the extraterrestrial origin of ancient knowledge. It's possible that this mysterious board game once helped people communicate with higher powers or even with extraterrestrial civilizations. 1999 Germany, Nibra. In July 1999, two illegal diggers with metal detectors found a bronze disc about 32 centimeters in diameter on the Mittelberg Hill near the town of Nibra, covered with green patina and gold inlays in the form of the sun, moon, and stars. Along with it, bronze swords, axes, and bracelets were found in the ground, which allowed archaeologists to accurately date the find to around the year 1600. BC, the Bronze Age, a time when, according to textbooks, people did not possess systematic astronomical knowledge. Further analysis showed that the disk depicts not just stars, but specific celestial cycles. The group of 7 dots corresponds to the Pleiades, whose position was used to determine the beginning of agricultural seasons, and the arcs on the edges of the disk indicate the points of sunrise and sunset on the days of the solstice. The angle between them is exactly 82 degrees, a value that matches the actual angle of the sun's path for the latitude of Central Europe. This disk enabled synchronization of the lunar and solar calendars, which requires complex observation and calculation. The problem is that such knowledge officially appears in Europe only 1,000 years later in ancient Greece, and then disappears again and returns only during the Renaissance. In the Bronze Age of Central Europe, there are no records of observatories, texts, or traditions that could explain the existence of such an instrument. The Nibra disk is officially recognized as authentic and housed in a museum. Its dating has been confirmed by independent laboratories, but its appearance remains unexplained because it is a precise astronomical instrument from an era when, according to the accepted version of history, such instruments could not have existed. Stone cubes. Not far from Albuquerque in New Mexico, a group of tourists reached the edge of a canyon. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary rock formation, but the longer you look, the more it feels off. The cliff edges are perfectly straight, the faces even, as if not shaped by time. In some places, the stone masses form distinct cubes. Each one weighs about 100 tons. There are no signs of processing, but there is no chaos of nature here either. Everything is just too geometric. Comparisons immediately started appearing online. Some recalled the Bimini Road in the Bahamas, those mysterious underwater stone slabs, while others mentioned Baalbek's megaliths. But still, the main reaction is the same. It looks wrong, too perfect to be natural, too heavy to be man-made. Of course, scientists can explain a lot. Weathering, crystal geometry, pressure, fractures. But visually, It's not convincing because when you stand next to these shapes, you don't get the feeling that nature made them. The question arises, if this is really artificial, then who made it and why? This isn't the first or last place where nature seems to accidentally imitate someone's work. But sometimes you start to suspect that it's the other way around, that it's not nature imitating technology, but that we just haven't figured out who was here before us. Birth certificate. Before you is one of the oldest birth certificates created more than 4,000 years ago in the Sumerian civilization. It consists of 2 clay tablets. One is covered with cuneiform writing, and the other bears the impression of a child's foot. In ancient Mesopotamia, such tablets were used as official documents confirming a person's birth. The cuneiform text probably contains the child's name, the parents' names, the date of birth, and possibly even astrological predictions, while the footprint served as a kind of personal signature, a unique way of identifying an infant. This artifact shows how advanced the bureaucratic systems were in Sumer. Even back then, people understood the importance of documentation, and such records could be used to confirm inheritance or social rights. This is a real window into the ancient world, which seems so distant, but in some ways is very similar to ours. 2600 BC Egypt, Saqqara. In Saqqara, in a necropolis dating back to the 26th century BC, there are 24 granite sarcophagi, each carved from a single block of Aswan granite and weighing from 70 to 100 tons. These sarcophagi are located in the underground galleries of the Serapeum at a depth of more than 10 meters and were discovered in 1851 by the French archaeologist Auguste Mariette. Their inner surfaces are polished to a mirror finish with a tolerance of less than 0.01 mm, which matches the precision of modern CNC machines. Aswan granite has a hardness of 6.7 on the Mohs scale, and even today working with it requires diamond tools, cooling, and constant pressure. However, the official version claims that the Egyptians used copper saws, sand, and manual labor. In 1995, engineer Christopher Dunn conducted measurements of the sarcophagi and showed that the inner corners have perfect 90-degree geometry, and the surfaces are free of waviness, which is inevitable with manual processing. Such parameters are impossible without machinery.
Вращение и стабилизированного инструмента.
The strangest thing is that the sarcophagi were not used. Lids weighing up to 30 tons were moved, but inside, no mummies, inscriptions, or ritual traces were found, which completely contradicts the purpose of tombs. These objects do not fit into either the religious practices or the technological capabilities of the Old Kingdom, and to this day there is no explanation as to how. They were carved, transported from Aswan over 800 kilometers, and installed in narrow underground corridors with only a few centimeters of clearance. And this is not an isolated case. In Giza, in the so-called Granite Temple, there are blocks weighing up to 200 tons fitted together without mortar, with gaps of less than a millimeter. Surface analysis shows traces of high-speed cutting that do not match the tools known from the 3rd millennium BC. Egypt has been officially dated, studied, and described, but there are still too many objects that look like traces of another technological culture that existed long before the pharaohs and disappeared without a trace. Antarctic sarcophagi. During an international scientific expedition in Antarctica, a group of researchers from the USA, China, Russia, and India discovered an object that immediately sparked controversy and concern. At a depth of several dozen meters beneath the permafrost, 4 dark sarcophagi were found, smooth and even with corners and edges so perfect that it could indicate laser processing. The shape resembled monolithic slabs, and the sarcophagi themselves maintained a stable temperature above 0, despite the surrounding cold. Researchers recorded a low-frequency humming and slight tremors in the soil in the immediate vicinity of the objects, even though none of the equipment in the camp could have been the source of such vibrations. When one of the sarcophagi was opened, a metal cylinder was found, with symbols that did not belong to any known writing system. Scientists have proposed several theories about the origin of the find. One hypothesis suggests that the sarcophagi may be remnants of an ancient civilization that existed before the last ice age. Another hypothesis allows for a technological origin and a connection with as yet unidentified technological experiments during the Cold War era. However, supporters of ufological theories believe that what we see is a fragment of an extraterrestrial structure, abandoned or hidden under the ice many thousands of years ago. Despite the public outcry, official data on the incident remains limited, and the sarcophagi themselves were taken for further study in closed laboratories. The disappearance of the 10 lost tribes of Israel is one of the most mysterious and least discussed topics in history. At the end of the 8th century BC, almost the entire ancient Israelite state disappeared. The Assyrians conquered the northern kingdom of Israel, and with them 10 out of the 12 tribes that made up the people disappeared. Essentially, 5/6 of the population. Where did they go? Historical chronicles report that after the conquest, the Assyrians forcibly relocated the Israelites to Mesopotamia, to the regions of present-day Iran and Afghanistan. At that point, the trail goes cold. The people vanish from history. Over 2,000 years later, they've become almost mythical. They were searched for worldwide in India, Iraq, and the Caucasus. In Japan, there is even a movement called Makuya, whose followers are convinced that the Japanese imperial family has Jewish origins. According to them, the very word Mikado comes from Megadol, meaning great. Some see the Afghan Pashtuns as descendants of the Israelites, while others see them in the Native Americans of North America. But none of these theories has been recognized. There is no definite genetic connection. There is no written evidence, no archaeological trace. There is only a legend and the desire to find those who once left and never returned. A treasure of gold jewelry. Archaeologists, while exploring the Karnak temple complex in Luxor, discovered an ancient vessel filled with gold jewelry, beads, and figurines of Egyptian gods. According to experts, the find dates back to the 26th dynasty of Egypt and is about 2,600 years old. Jewelry in ancient Egypt was not just a luxury item. They were considered magical amulets that protected the owner from evil and disease. They played an important role not only in life, but also in the afterlife, providing protection for eternity. Among the artifacts, the statuettes of the god Amun, the goddess Mut, and their son Khonsu stand out in particular. They were probably used as amulets and worn around the neck. Amun was considered the king of the gods and the patron of pharaohs, and later he merged with Ra, becoming the embodiment of both the visible and invisible deity. All the discovered items will be restored and possibly displayed in the Luxor Museum. Copper object. This mysterious artifact, made from a single piece of copper alloy, puzzles researchers and collectors. The object is rather roughly cast with visible defects and has a head in the shape of a rectangular prism that tapers on all sides to a sharp edge. The handle, smoothly rounded at the end, shows no signs of impact, which indicates that it was not used for striking in the usual sense. Interestingly, there used to be parallel scratch lines on the faces of the head, which have worn away over time. This may indicate repeated use of the artifact, possibly during cutting, grinding, or scraping. The estimated dating of the artifact ranges from 5 to 10,000 years, but its exact origin remains unclear. Some researchers hypothesize that this object could have been used for ritual purposes or as part of an unknown technological device. Supporters of alternative history believe that such artifacts could have been part of ancient, highly advanced tools created using technologies that surpass the capabilities of ancient metallurgists. 1513. The map that shouldn't exist. In 1513, Ottoman Admiral Piri Reis created a map of the world, using, as he himself noted in a footnote, no fewer than 20 ancient sources, some of which were very old and of unknown origin. This map was only discovered in 1929 in the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, and immediately after its publication it raised an issue that still hasn't been resolved. The map accurately depicts the coastline of South America, including Brazil, with correct proportions, angles, and outlines, which have been confirmed by 20th century satellite imagery. But the strangest thing is that in the lower part of the map, there is a continent whose shape matches Antarctica, and it's shown without its ice cover. Geological studies conducted in 1915 and in the 1950s and 60s by US and Soviet expeditions showed that the coastline of Antarctica without ice existed no later than 6,000 years ago, and possibly even earlier. In 1956, U.S. Air Force Colonel Harold Ohlmeyer submitted an official report to the Air Force stating that the Piri Reis map contains data that could not have been obtained in the 16th century, including an exact match of the subglacial relief of Antarctica, which was confirmed by seismic exploration only in 1949. During Operation High Jump, to create such a map, either aerial photography, a global geodetic system, or sources created before the continent was covered with ice would be necessary. Piri Reis was not the only one. The Orange Fine map of 1531 and the Mercator map of 1569 show the same outlines of the southern continent, with a 95% match of the coastlines when overlaid on modern geological models. But official history claims that Antarctica was only discovered in 1820, and before that, humanity had neither the technical capability nor the geographical knowledge for such cartographic constructions. If these maps are accurate, it means that someone mapped the Earth long before the age of sail, the compass, and longitude. And if these sources existed, it means that geographical knowledge was completely lost, because after the 16th century, such maps were no longer created, and humanity was rediscovering a world that had already once been measured. Skulls of a different type. When archaeologists began systematically opening tombs in southern Egypt and Nubia in the early 20th century, they noticed something strange. Some of the skulls they found did not match human anatomy. Yes, they had eye sockets, a jaw, a parietal bone, but all with abnormalities, elongated occiputs, disproportionately large cranial vaults, and the absence of sutures that a normal skull should have. Some of the skulls were so elongated that they resembled cones, as if they had been artificially deformed. But there were no traces of artificial deformation found. Later, in the 1950s and 60s, British and French anatomists began discussing these findings at closed conferences, but there were almost no official publications. Why? Perhaps because these skulls were found not only in Egypt. Similar shapes were discovered in Peru, Mexico, even in the Caucasus. Their age ranges from 2,000 to 5,000 years. Different continents, different cultures, the same result. Some believe that elongated skulls are the result of special head binding during infancy. For example, the Maya did this. But in a number of Egyptian finds, the bone structure suggests otherwise. The shape was originally like that. If it's not a disease, then it's a different species. Not ours, but forgotten. Some images in temples even reinforce this impression. They depict beings with elongated heads, wearing special headdresses, perhaps not to decorate, but to hide, or on the contrary, to accentuate. Because if these skulls are not fake, not a coincidence, and not a deformity, then who were the Egyptians living with? A continent underwater. At the bottom of the Madura Strait near the island of Java, archaeologists found something no one expected. Not a sunken ship, not artifacts, but an entire ecosystem. Layers of earth where remains of Homo erectus, fragments of skulls, and traces of life about 140,000 years old have been preserved. Along with them are the bones of giant bulls, turtle shells, and bone fragments that were broken to extract bone marrow. This is not just an ancient human site. It's a fragment of a sunken, vanished continent, a lost world that once connected the islands to the mainland. Scientists call it Sundaland. Today it's underwater, but back then it was plains. Something like an Asian savanna with rivers, forests, and herds of large animals. Archaeologists found traces of processing on the animal bones, similar to those of mainland Homo erectus. But until now, it was believed that the Javanese groups did not have such skills. Now it's clear there was contact and cultural exchange between the populations. They shared hunting, butchering, and shell processing methods. This speaks not only about technique, but also about memory and the transmission of knowledge. In addition to traces of hunting, remains of mollusks and river sharks were found. Everything indicates that there was once a rich, vibrant, and complex landscape here where humans were part of the ecosystem. And now, all of this is at the bottom. Sundaland sank underwater tens of thousands of years ago. Quietly, without signs of cities or temples, it vanished. And if it weren't for random discoveries on the seafloor, we wouldn't even know it existed. It reminds us that huge pieces of history can disappear not because of a catastrophe, but simply because of time, and all that remains is a fragment of bones from a faded past. 750 BC Assyria, Nimrud, In 1850, in the ruins of the Assyrian city of Nimrud, British archaeologist Austin Henry Layard discovered a small crystal object about 4 centimeters in diameter, carved from rock crystal. The object was found in layers dating back to the 8th century BC, and for a long time was considered an ornament or decorative item. But laboratory analysis revealed that it was a lens with a focal length of about 12 centimeters and an optical magnification of up to 3 times. Today it is known as the Nimrud lens and is kept in the British Museum under inventory number 91,110. Optical tests conducted in the 20th century showed that the lens was not accidental. It has an spherical shape that reduces distortions and allows light to be focused on a specific point, making it suitable not only for magnification but also for working with small objects. In the 1970s, researchers at the British Museum confirmed that the lens could be used for engraving, precise carving, and even for observing celestial bodies when properly assembled into a system. The problem is that officially, optics as a technology only appeared in the 13th century, and the first telescopes were created at the beginning of the 17th century. Before that, according to the history of science, humanity had neither the theory of lenses nor the practice of making them. But the Assyrian lens existed. It is polished, has precise geometry, and was made not as a random stone but as a tool. Moreover, in the same region, micro engravings are found on seals and ornaments, with lines less than 0.1 mm thick, which is impossible to do without magnification. If optical instruments existed in the 18th century BC, it means that craftsmen of that time could work with a precision unattainable by ordinary vision. And this automatically casts doubt on the explanation of many ancient technologies as primitive. But after Nimrud, optics completely disappears and reappears only 1,500 years later in a different civilization and without any connection to the Assyrian tradition. Pottery Hill. In the very heart of the Libyan desert, 200 kilometers from the nearest oasis, there is a hill covered with thousands of ancient clay vessels. This is Abu Balas, a place that still doesn't give a clear answer. Why did the ancient Egyptians carry hundreds of kilograms of ceramics across the desert to leave them here? The vessels are up to 4,000 years old, and many of them were meant for water, but there are no springs or wells nearby. The sand covers the shards, but the best preserved ones show they were deliberately placed here in neat rows, like a warehouse. Some scientists believe this was a staging base on the way to Central Africa, while others suggest it was a supply point for some secret expedition. Perhaps it's not related to trade, but to the search for something we've long forgotten. The strange route going deep into the desert doesn't lead to any known cities. It ends in the sands, as if the caravans never returned. Forgotten rulers of Egypt. Most of us think of Egypt as an eternal civilization, strong, proud, and independent. But there was a time when it was ruled by outsiders. They were called the Hyksos. This word means rulers of foreign lands or shepherd kings. Who they really were is still a matter of debate. The Hyksos invaded Egypt around the 17th century BC, and they didn't just destroy the country, they subjugated it. They founded a dynasty, ruled for almost a century, and introduced new technologies. It is believed that they were the ones who brought the war chariot to Egypt. This changed the entire strategy of warfare in the Middle East. There is also evidence that the Hyksos were the first to actively use bronze and composite weapons in Egyptian territory. Where they came from remains a mystery. Some believe they came from Canaan, which is modern-day Levant, while others think they were nomadic tribes from Asia. Some researchers suggest that the Hyksos were a mix of different peoples, traders, warriors, herders, who united during a wave of migration and wars, but their culture has not survived in its pure form. We know about them mainly from Egyptian sources, which means there's a strong sense of hostility. After the expulsion of the Hyksos, the Egyptians began a new era, the 18th dynasty, the very one in which Tutankhamun lived. Perhaps it was hatred toward their oppressors that made Egypt a great power once again. But at the same time, some of the Hyksos' achievements were preserved and became part of Egyptian tradition. Moments like these always catch my attention, when the victors not only forget the defeated, but also take the best of them. A rare giant book. Before you is one of 12 giant books from the 18th century written in Spanish. Its size is impressive, almost a meter long. These books were created for religious ceremonies and contain detailed scripts of worship services, leather binding, wooden covers, pages made from treated animal skin. All this made the book not only durable, but also a symbol of the church's grandeur. Such manuscripts were intended for use in churches, where clergy and the choir could read the text from a distance. That's why the letters are so large. Today, this rarity is kept at the National Autonomous University of Mexico. Restorers are carefully studying it, trying to preserve it in its original form. These books are a real window into the past, allowing us to see what liturgical texts looked like and what the attitude toward writing was in the era of colonial Latin America. Alien visitors in Egypt. Recent archaeological excavations in Egypt have led to a sensational discovery that has attracted the attention of the whole world. Archaeologists have found artifacts in the Giza Plateau area that, according to some scientists, may be evidence that aliens visited Earth 5,000 years ago. It all began with excavations in a recently discovered tomb dating back to the Old Kingdom of Egypt. Among the items found, metal plates with mysterious symbols stood out in particular, and images of flying objects that resembled modern UFOs. Analysis of the artifacts showed that they are covered with inscriptions in an unknown language. Some scientists suggest that this could be a message from extraterrestrials, which the ancient Egyptians might have perceived as contact with another civilization. Linguists are already working on deciphering these symbols, but so far the results remain unclear. Attention was also drawn to images of unidentified flying objects on the plates, which, according to ufologists, could be diagrams of an alien ship. It seems to me that so far the researchers have made a lot of hasty conclusions, and most likely the interpretation of these plates will be more down to earth. Therefore, it's better to wait until the study of these artifacts is completed and find out what symbols are depicted and why they are there.
200 BC 500 AD micro.
In the museums of Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador, there are gold artifacts whose sizes are measured in millimeters and fractions of a millimeter, yet they're made with precision that's invisible to the naked eye. In the collections of the Gold Museum in Bogota, there are microspirals, wire less than 0.2 mm thick, and figurines made up of dozens of parts joined together without any traces of soldering. Dated approximately from 200 BC to 500 AD analysis has shown that the gold contains platinum impurities, whose melting point exceeds 1700 degrees, while officially, ancient furnaces could not reach even 1200 degrees. In the 1970s, metallurgists from the Smithsonian Institution determined that the items were not cast, but sintered under precise temperature control, which requires either a complex furnace or a multi-stage process, both of which are completely unknown for pre-Columbian cultures. However, a similar technology appeared in Europe only in the 18th century when platinum was first processed industrially. But in America, it was used 1,500 years before that, without written sources and without traces of technological development. Similar micro-technologies are found in the Old World. In Egypt and Mesopotamia, stone and gold beads less than a millimeter in diameter have been found with perfectly smooth holes that show no signs of hand drilling. In India, in layers dated to the first millennium BC, micro drillings with consistent spacing and smooth walls have been found, which no hand tool can produce. Even under a microscope, there are no signs of the vibrations typical of handwork. The strangest thing is that these items are not unique experiments. They are found by the dozens and hundreds in different cultures and in different centuries. But the technology for making them does not develop, does not spread, and is not described. It simply exists in its finished form and then disappears as if the craftsman who knew it vanished along with it. Plume under the Afar region. Deep beneath the African continent, something is happening that could change not only geography, but also our very understanding of Earth's stability. Scientists have discovered a giant plume, a stream of molten rock rising from the boundary between the mantle and the core. Its power is so great that it is literally tearing Africa apart. Signals of this movement have been detected in Kenya, Malawi, and even in the Red Sea. Isotopes of gas in geothermal springs point to the same source, a deep mantle flow similar to the one that formed Hawaii. But in Africa, it spreads outward instead of upward, breaking the lithosphere from within. This explains the increasing volcanic activity in East Africa and the progressing rift that stretches for thousands of kilometers. Some scientists are convinced that in the foreseeable future the continent will indeed split. But that's not the only issue. If a plume is capable of destroying continents, then who or what could use such forces? After all, such phenomena are described not only in geology, but also in ancient texts and legends, where the Earth suddenly disappears along with a forgotten civilization. On one of the plateaus in western India, far from cities and tourist routes, archaeologists discovered petroglyphs that, according to preliminary estimates, are more than 12,000 years old. They are carved directly onto the stone surface. The figures are strange, as if they are stylized people with elongated bodies, heads and arms that resemble something else entirely. Some of the images draw direct parallels with the mythology of the Sumerian Indus civilization. A similar image is also found on seals discovered in Mesopotamia. There, it is interpreted as a celestial being, a mediator between worlds. And now, the same silhouette suddenly appears on the Indian plateau, thousands of kilometers away. Scientists are cautious, calling it a coincidence of forms, and saying we can't yet call it a single culture. However, another viewpoint exists. Perhaps these images are the last trace of a civilization about which we know nothing at all, one that existed long before writing, before the Vedic culture, and whose traces remain only on stone. There are more questions than answers. Who carved them? What do they mean? Why do they look so similar to images from other parts of the ancient world? And how is it that these signs were literally underfoot, but almost no one knew about them? The years 500 to 1000 AD Columbia, aerodynamics. Small gold figurines, ranging from 4 to 7 centimeters in length, are kept in museums in Colombia and the United States. They were found in the burials of the Tolima culture and are dated between 500 and 1000 AD. Officially, they are considered to be depictions of birds or insects, but they have features that do not exist in nature. These objects have vertical tail fins, rigid triangular wings, a fixed fuselage, and a shape that completely matches the aerodynamic design of an airplane, not a living creature. In 1994, German engineers Peter Belting and Konrad Lubers created enlarged models of these figurines, precisely maintaining their proportions, and equipped them with motors and radio controls. The models took off, remained stable in the air, and performed controlled flight without any structural modifications. Later, similar tests were conducted in the United States, where aerodynamic analysis showed that the shape of the wings generated lift that was impossible for flapping flight, but ideal for a glider or airplane. The problem is that vertical tail fins, symmetrical wing profiles, and stabilized fuselages only appeared in aviation at the beginning of the 20th century, after decades of experiments and mathematical calculations. Such shapes do not exist in nature, and they could not have been a random artistic invention, because random shapes do not fly. To create such a configuration, you need to understand the distribution of airflow and the center of gravity, and this knowledge was officially formed only after the works of Cayley and Lilienthal in the 19th century. The figurines are recognized as authentic, their metallurgical composition is confirmed, their dating is beyond doubt, and they were found in closed archaeological contexts, but their shape still does not have a satisfactory explanation. If objects that correspond to the principles of aerodynamics were created in pre-Columbian America, it means that the understanding of flight existed long before aviation, and then disappeared completely, leaving behind no drawings, no descriptions, and no attempts at further development. In 1908, archaeologists made a stunning discovery: 4,500-year-old statues of Pharaoh Menkaure surrounded by two goddesses, hidden in the sands of Giza. These statues have been preserved in almost perfect condition, demonstrating the highest level of skill of ancient Egyptian sculptors. Menkaure was not just a ruler, but the builder of one of the Great Pyramids, and here he is depicted surrounded by two goddesses. To the left of the pharaoh stands Hathor, the goddess of love, motherhood, and the sky, symbolizing protection and divine patronage. On the right is a female figure representing one of the nomes, the regions of Egypt, emphasizing the importance of the king as the unifier of the country. These compositions not only glorified the pharaoh, but also emphasized his connection with the gods. The Menkaure sculptures are some of the most impressive examples of ancient Egyptian art. They lift the veil on the past, allowing us to see how the Egyptians perceived power, divinity, and royal grandeur. The Emerald Cup. This 17th century emerald cup is a true treasure, carved from a single piece of emerald weighing 252 carats. Such artifacts are extremely rare, as working with such a large stone requires incredible skill. The surface of the cup is adorned with a delicate inscription in Arabic, which indicates its origin from the Islamic world, most likely from Persia or India, where the art of stone carving was at the highest level. Back then, emeralds were prized for both their beauty and supposed magical powers, like protection from poison and granting wisdom. Cups made from such stones could belong only to rulers or noble aristocrats and were used on special occasions, emphasizing the owner's status. Special attention is given to the hexagonal shape and smooth facets, which reflect light and make the emerald shine. Such items symbolize power and spiritual purity, and today this cup is considered one of the rarest and most valuable artifacts that have preserved the grandeur of past eras. The most terrifying tribe. Traveler and blogger Daniel Pinto caused a real shock by publishing a video with the Vitovai tribe from Papua New Guinea. In the video, which has gathered over 17 million views, he shows a meeting with the silent members of the tribe, guarding the sacred waterfall. The Vitovai people are dressed in costumes made of mud and clay, and their masks resemble spirit birds with long noses and fierce expressions. They protect the waterfall from outsiders, and they are quite intimidating. However, viewers have questioned the authenticity of the video. Some commenters claim that the most fearsome tribe would never let a blogger get so close. Others joke that their costumes look like fashionable outfits. Despite controversy, the video has drawn tourists to the region. Now, the travel agency mentions Vitovai as a tourist destination, offering guests eco-lodges and an introduction to the tribe's culture. And what do you think? Is this tribe real, or just another way to attract naive tourists? Write your opinion in the comments below the video. The mystery of the Herculaneum Scroll. Thanks to artificial intelligence and advanced X-ray technologies, scientists have managed to decipher the text of one of the ancient Herculaneum scrolls for the first time. These unique artifacts, which survived the eruption of Vesuvius in 79 AD, remained a mystery for almost 2,000 years. The scrolls were discovered in the 1750s among the ruins of a Roman villa. However, after the disaster, they turned into charred, fragile rolls that could not be unrolled without being destroyed. Most of them are kept in the National Library of Naples, while a few copies are in Oxford. In 2023, the Vesuvius Challenge competition was launched, aimed at finding technologies to decipher these texts. Recently, researchers announced a major breakthrough. With the help of high-energy X-ray scanning and artificial intelligence algorithms, the first image of the interior of the Oxford Scroll was created. Scientists have already identified several words, one of which is the Greek word for disgust. Although the text is still fragmentary, the method continues to improve. More than 1,000 similar scrolls are kept in Naples, and now researchers have hope for their deciphering. A frightening discovery in Kuwait. A unique 7,000-year-old clay figurine was found in Kuwait, resembling images of aliens, which became a real breakthrough in archaeology. This discovery took place at the Bara 1 archaeological site, which dates back to the 6th millennium BC. The figurine depicts a head with slanted eyes, a flat nose, and an elongated skull, which gives it a resemblance to modern ideas about aliens. This find is the first of its kind in the Arabian Gulf region. Similar artifacts were previously found in Mesopotamia. The figurine reflects the artistic traditions of the Ubaid culture, which was known for its unique ceramics and figurines. Interestingly, the figurine was made from Mesopotamian clay rather than local ceramics, which indicates cultural exchange. Ubaid art included the creation of figurines with symbolic meaning, and this discovery may help us understand the spiritual practices of ancient societies. The figurines might have been connected to religious rituals or served as symbols of social status. And while science has not confirmed the existence of visitors from space, the question of the nature of mysterious flying objects is something each person decides for themselves. The first to the 10th centuries AD, mechanisms that shouldn't work. In the 1st century AD in Alexandria, the engineer Heron described devices whose level of complexity would not appear in Europe for more than 1,000 years. In his treatises, Pneumatics and Automata, he recorded mechanisms with gear transmissions, valves, reverse motions, and programmable mechanisms. Temples opened their doors by themselves, statues moved, and altars lit up without fire. All of this worked thanks to the pressure of steam, water, and a system of transmissions calculated with a precision that required an understanding of mechanics and mathematics. These texts have been preserved. They are dated to the 1st century, and their authenticity is not disputed. But the problem is that such devices cannot be assembled without advanced production of standardized parts. According to the official version, the ancient world lacked machines and tools for precise mass production. These undocumented machines worked, as confirmed by 20th century reconstructions by engineers from the Science Museum in London and the Institute for the History of Science in Athens. In China, in 1092, the scholar Su Song built an astronomical clock over 12 meters tall, which used a chain drive, a water regulator, and a mechanical escapement, similar to those that only appeared in Europe in the 14th and 15th centuries. This clock displayed star movements, moon phases, and time of day, and its description remains in the Sun Dynasty's official chronicle. After Su Sun died, the mechanism was dismantled and the technology vanished, leaving no legacy. In the Arab world in 1206, the engineer Al-Jazari created mechanical automatons, clocks with programmable figures, and water pumps with a crankshaft mechanism, which would only appear in Europe 300 years later. His book of knowledge of ingenious mechanical devices contains drawings, dimensions, and instructions. But after him, the technology once again does not develop, and mechanical knowledge dissipates until the Renaissance. In all these cases, the same thing happens. Complex mechanisms appear suddenly, they work, they are described, and then they disappear from history as if they were an exception rather than a beginning. There is no line of development between ancient automata, Chinese astronomical clocks, and Arab machines, although according to the logic of progress, there should be. And if these mechanisms really existed and worked, it means that the level of engineering thinking in the past was higher than the official picture allows. The loss of this knowledge was not accidental, but systemic. Infiltration into Area 51. He wasn't looking for UFOs and didn't believe in aliens. He just wanted to follow the old prospector's route through the Nevada desert. But this route went through a classified area where no one is allowed. Jerry Freeman, an anthropologist from California, became the man who, without realizing it, crossed the boundaries of the most secret base in the U.S. and found himself at the center of one of the main mysteries of the 20th century. He traveled at night, hiding from patrols, all for the sake of finding the inscriptions left by the pioneers who perished in 1849. But in the area of the dried-up Papoose Lake, he encountered a phenomenon that completely knocked him out of his usual reality. Right in the middle of the desert at night, an opening appeared, emitting an intense blue light. The light did not scatter but seemed to gather into a pulsating core, above which floated lights that were flickering, synchronized, and clearly unnatural. According to Freeman, he felt a hum coming from beneath the ground in vibrations, as if something enormous was coming to life right in front of him. This was not a mirage. This was not Army range equipment. Everything was too precise, too synchronized to be a coincidence. He stood still, unable to move, and realized that if he was discovered, he would disappear forever. Later, he told journalist George Knapp about it, the same one who introduced Bob Lazar and Area S4 to the world in 1989. Since then, Jerry Freeman has remained the only one who not only got close to the secrets of Area 51, but also managed to leave without becoming part of yet another military secret. Desert Castle. In the middle of the dunes in the Algerian desert stands a ruin, lonely, without roads, without a name. Tourists don't come here, and there are hardly any satellite images. The place is called Ksar Dra, but that's unofficial. Ksar in Berber means palace or castle, and Dra is the name of a river that once flowed nearby. No one knows who built this castle. There are no exact dates and no remains of a settlement around it, just stone outlines against the sand. That's the impression you get, as if the structure was cut out of time and simply forgotten. It's amazing that even in the era of geolocation, drones, and expeditions, there are still places that almost no one has heard of. And perhaps these kinds of ruins are the most important of all because they don't fit into the usual picture. The year 775, a blow that leaves a mark on the trees. In 2012, Japanese researcher Fusa Miyake discovered something strange in the annual rings of Japanese cedar, a sharp spike in carbon-14, which was previously unknown. It can't be explained by climate or by measurement error. This spike turned out to be global. It was confirmed in trees in Europe, North America, Asia, and the Southern Hemisphere. And it occurred in the years 774-775 AD. Basically, the planet received a short-term burst of radiation, most likely from a super powerful solar flare, which can't be faked because it's recorded directly in the tree rings by year. After the discovery of the event in 775, it turned out that this was not an isolated case. A similar, though weaker spike in carbon-14 was recorded in the years 993 to 994, and another one around 660 BC. These events have been named the Miyake events, and their main significance is not that they are frightening, but that they provide archaeology with a tool that did not exist before: the ability to date an object not to a century or an era, but to a specific calendar year. In 2021, it was precisely by using such a marker from the year 993 that wood samples from a settlement in Newfoundland allowed dating the presence of the Norse in North America to an exact figure, the year 1021. Not approximately the 11th century, not plus or minus a decade, but a specific year, because tree rings record the Miyake events like a stamp, and then it's just a matter of counting the rings to the bark. After that, any story about inaccurate ancient dating starts to look different. It turns out there are events on the planet that set absolute markers. And as soon as archaeology gets enough wood or organic material with annual rings, it can reveal the chronology down to the year. And that's dangerous for the familiar picture of the past, because then many anomalies stop being debatable and turn into facts with an exact date, after which you can't go back a couple of centuries to save a nice theory. The tomb that is not opened. Everyone knows about the Sphinx, but almost no one knows that there is probably a cavity underneath it, sealed and even partially concreted. Back in the 1990s, geophysicist Tomasz Dobeckin conducted acoustic sounding of the plateau. An anomaly was discovered under the front paws of the Sphinx, a hollow chamber with clear rectangular edges. It couldn't have been a natural formation. It was a room or a tomb or something else. This news shook the world of alternative archaeology. The claims went even further. Supposedly, ancient Egyptian texts mentioned a certain Hall of Records, a place where knowledge left by the gods before the flood was kept, and it could have been right there, under the Sphinx. One step, and we could have opened a door into prehistoric times. But instead, there was silence. The Egyptian authorities did not grant permission for excavations. The site was declared closed for research. Moreover, according to unconfirmed reports, the shaft at the base of the Sphinx was filled with concrete, just like that, without any explanation. Why remains unclear. Perhaps not because there is nothing there, but because they know exactly what is there. Who built the pyramids? They've stood for over 4,500 years. Hundreds of tons of stone, millions of blocks and trees, with precisely calculated angles. Majestic, almost alien. The pyramids of Giza still remain a symbol of eternity and mystery. But the main question is simple: how? Modern archaeology offers different theories. According to one of them, the blocks were quarried, delivered to the construction site using sledges and wetted sand. Another theory suggests the blocks were made on site from limestone and clay, essentially forming ancient concrete. The French engineer Joseph Davidovits even presented his own formula for geopolymer stone. And yet, even taking these hypotheses into account, we don't have a definite answer. It's not just about the technology, the mystery lies in the scale. To build the Pyramid of Khufu, it would have taken about 2.3 million blocks. Even with perfect organization of labor, that's decades of work and thousands of workers. And now let's remember, this was the ancient world. No wheeled cranes, no steel, no electricity, and yet the internal shafts are aligned with centimeter precision, and the orientation of the pyramid's sides almost perfectly matches the four cardinal directions. And there are other questions. Why were such tombs needed? Why are all three pyramids of Giza aligned at the same angles as the stars of Orion's belt? Why do some blocks show traces of processing that look more like melting than cutting? The more I read about the pyramids, the more I feel they are not just structures, they are a message. They were built not only for the dead, they were built for the future, for us. And until we understand exactly how they were built, we won't understand why. Cores, a global chronicle of catastrophes. There is another source that works as the planet's archive and also leaves no room for convenient explanations. These are the ice cores of Greenland and Antarctica, kilometer-high columns of ice in which the atmosphere of the past is recorded layer by layer. There, you can see spikes of sulfates, ash, and chemical markers of eruptions. And when the same event is recorded in several cores on different continents at once, the argument about a local problem ends. It was there that the crisis of the year 536 was reconstructed. When European and Eastern chronicles described a dim sun and a cold summer, and the ice cores showed a sharp increase in volcanic aerosols, not just once, but in a series. A similar pattern is repeated for the year 1257, when the eruption of Samalis left such a powerful trace in the chemistry of the ice that it is visible in several cores at once and in both hemispheres. And then come years of cooling and poor harvests recorded by chronicles and indirect demographic data. These ice markers are important for one reason. They show that humanity has had periods when the environment was destroyed not gradually but abruptly, and such shocks occurred in windows of time, after which archaeology observes breaks, voids, and simplification of technologies. When, in the same period, global-scale climate shocks are dated, and at the same time cultural collapses, the disappearance of crafts, the fall of cities, and the break in traditions are recorded. It becomes difficult to maintain the idea of steady linear progress because the planet itself periodically erased what had been accumulated. A giraffe made of quartz. At first glance, it looks like a child's figurine. A giraffe sitting calmly, as if frozen in the moment, but it is carved from a single piece of rose quartz, one of the most difficult stones to work with. It was created not in Africa or Asia, but in France in 1900 by the House of Cartier. Why the jewelers of the Art Nouveau era decided to carve a giraffe from quartz is unclear. Perhaps it was a symbol of distant lands, exoticism, or a hidden reference to ancient images. After all, in Egypt and Mesopotamia, they also carved animal figurines from minerals. Only now it's for private collections, not for temples. A sword for the immortals. Before you is not just a weapon. This is a sword created at the turn of Eras, when China was divided into dozens of warring kingdoms. But someone, in the midst of this harsh reality, did something different. Not for battles, not for victories, but as if for a ritual. The blade is bronze, but with a shade of turquoise, as if the metal has absorbed the color of the sky. The handle is carved from rock crystal, like ice. It is inlaid with gold details and turquoise inserts. The geometry, ornamentation, and finishing are all so well thought out that it becomes clear. The sword was not made for a soldier's hand. It was created for something greater. The Warring States period is the 5th to 3rd centuries BC, a time of constant war, betrayal, and great reforms. But this sword stands out from the context. It speaks of ritual. It could have been used in sacrifices, in rites of passage, or as a symbol of power that needed not to be held, but to be proven. It is exactly these kinds of artifacts that are confusing, because they don't match our idea of the ancient world. We expect crude blades and traces of battles, but instead we get crystal, gold, and metal crafted like jewelry. The mysterious petroglyphs of Dighton Rock. On the bank of the Taunton River in Massachusetts, there is a small museum with a single but very unusual exhibit, a 40-ton boulder that was taken out of the water and placed here in 1963. This stone is known as Dighton Rock. Dighton Rock has long puzzled researchers with its mysterious inscriptions, the origin of which has remained a mystery for several centuries. The rock is about 1.5 meters high, 3.5 meters long, and 3 meters wide. Its surface, covered with petroglyphs, was once slanted toward the water and probably served as a kind of message from a sailor. The symbols engraved on the stone are straight lines, geometric shapes, primitive images of people, and strange writings. The first written mention of the Dighton Rock dates back to 1686. The English colonist John Danforth drew the symbols, and 10 years later Reverend Cotton Mather described them in his book, calling them strange marks left by unknown ancient peoples. The rock gave rise to many hypotheses. In 1837, the Danish researcher Carl Christian Raffen claimed that the inscriptions were made by Vikings and were connected to the journey of Thorfinn Karlsefni, who, according to the Scandinavian sagas, reached the shores of North America in the 11th century. His theory caused a sensation. But in 1916, Professor Edmund Delabar from Brown University proved that Raffen had forged the image by adding lines that supported his hypothesis. Delabar himself proposed a new version. He saw the name Miguel Cartiero and the date 1511 in the inscriptions. In his opinion, this message was left by a Portuguese explorer who went missing in America. In 1502, Cartiero set out to search for his brother, who had gone missing off the coast of Newfoundland, but he disappeared himself. He may have been forced to stay among the Indians, and 9 years later, he carved a message about his fate on a rock. Delabar's theory found support in Portugal, but it was received with caution in the rest of the world. Some believe that the authors of the inscriptions were ancient Phoenicians, while others say they were Chinese who reached America long before Columbus. Despite centuries of research, the Dighton Rock remains one of the most mysterious archaeological finds in the United States, continuing to inspire researchers to search for its true history. Sharp breaks in the layers. If you look at archaeological layers not by individual countries, but as a single chronology of the planet, a picture emerges that cannot be explained by wars, migrations, or decline. In different parts of the world at the same time, cultural layers end abruptly, followed by emptiness, and then a new culture appears, as if the world was being restarted. The first such break was recorded around 2200 BC. In Mesopotamia, the Akkadian Empire disappears. In Egypt, the Old Kingdom ends, cities become deserted, and construction stops. Written records and cultural sources come to an end. Analysis of ice cores in Greenland shows a sharp cooling and a drought that lasted for decades. And in the layers of the Middle East, a dusty horizon appears as a result of a global climate catastrophe. After that, the level of technology declines. Stone and bronze working becomes simpler, and complex projects disappear. The second collapse occurs around 1200 BC, the so-called Bronze Age collapse. Within a single generation, Mycenae and the Hittite kingdom disappear, as well as the cities of the Levant and the Mediterranean trade networks. Writing disappears, metallurgy becomes simpler, and palaces turn into ruins. In the layers of Turkey, Syria, Greece, and Israel, archaeologists record the same destruction horizon, all dated to the same period. After that, the world becomes technologically poorer, and many skills are lost for centuries. The next global collapse is recorded in the year 536 AD chronicles. From Europe, China, and the Middle East, describe a sun without light, a cold summer, famine, and epidemics. Modern research shows that during this time, a series of volcanic eruptions occurred, releasing so much ash into the atmosphere that the temperature on the planet dropped by 1.5 to 2 degrees. In the archaeological layers of this period, a gap appears again. Cities shrink, construction stops, complex crafts disappear, and the standard of living is set back by centuries. And the final blow came in 1257 when the eruption of the Samalas volcano in Indonesia became the largest in the last 7,000 years. Its traces have been found. In Europe and Asia, famine, mass mortality, and political collapse are recorded. It was after this period that many technologies recorded in the Arab world, China, and Europe disappeared or were simplified, and the knowledge accumulated over centuries seemed to be erased. In all these cases, the same scenario repeats. An advanced culture, a sudden collapse, a technological void, and a new, simpler system. This doesn't look like evolution. It looks like a reset, after which humanity starts from a lower point each time, rediscovering things it once already knew how to do. And if these collapses are truly global, then all the impossible discoveries we've seen before stop being exceptions. They become fragments of worlds destroyed not gradually, but all at once, leaving behind only traces that we now consider anomalies. The disappearance of Atlantis. Atlantis is not just an ancient legend, it's a cultural phantom that still influences minds, dreams, and even science. John described it in remarkable detail: a huge island with a highly developed civilization, a powerful army, and a complex system of canals. He claimed that Atlantis was located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, opposite the Atlas Mountains, and sank underwater as a result of a massive earthquake in just one day, around 9,500 BC. More than 11,000 years have passed since then, and we are still debating whether it ever existed. People have searched for it in Crete and Santorini, in Cuba and Brazil, in Iceland, and at the bottom of the Atlantic. Scientists have proposed hundreds of theories, from the disaster on Thera to a distorted memory of a sunken part of the Sahara. The problem is that we don't have a single direct piece of archaeological evidence. No artifacts, no remains, no genetic trace. But science also can't completely disprove the existence of Atlantis. The strangest thing is the scale of its influence. The legend of Atlantis gave rise to entire philosophical schools. Occult theories, Nazi mystics, pseudosciences, conspiracy theorists, and science fiction writers all drew upon it. Atlantis became a symbol of a lost golden age. It fascinates us because it's not just a vanished land. It's the idea that once we were more than we are now. Sometimes I think that Atlantis isn't a sunken island, but a reflection of our dream. We want to believe that people were once stronger, smarter, better. And until we learn the truth, this story will keep resurfacing again and again. Puppet dolls with removable heads. In El Salvador, archaeologists have discovered unique clay figurines about 2,400 years old. These artifacts, found in the ruins of a pyramid in San Isidro, resemble puppets. They have open mouths, and the larger ones have removable heads with holes through which a string could be threaded for manipulation. Researchers call these finds Bolinas figurines. Similar artifacts have previously been found in Guatemala. Among the 5 figurines, there is for the first time a male character who has patterns resembling tattoos. Archaeologists believe that the dolls were used in rituals that imitated real or mythological events. In ancient Mesoamerica, it was believed that creating an image of a person literally brought them to life, allowing them to be present even from a distance. The discovery confirms that ancient El Salvador was part of a complex cultural network connected with Guatemala, Panama, and Nicaragua. What doesn't add up in the dates? In 2020, a group of researchers from Harvard and the University of Helsinki published a study that suggested radiocarbon dating from 3000 to 1000 BC contains a systematic error of up to 200 to 300 years due to fluctuations in solar activity. This means that many objects we consider to be younger may actually be significantly older. In 2018, the journal Nature published data on Greenland ice cores, where sharp spikes in the concentration of beryllium-10 and carbon-14 were recorded, indicating catastrophic events that occurred around 2200 and 2200 BC. These dates exactly coincide with the moments of the collapse of civilizations, the disappearance of technologies, and the failures of cultural traditions all over the world. And in 2022, an analysis of sedimentary rocks conducted in China, Turkey, and South America showed synchronous layers of destruction caused by a sharp cooling and droughts that lasted not for decades, but for generations. These events are officially recognized, documented, and published, but are never associated with the loss of knowledge. This would mean admitting that technologies vanished not by accident, but on a large, simultaneous scale. And if you combine this data with what we've seen before, it becomes clear. Technologies didn't disappear one by one. They vanished in entire layers. And each time humanity started over, no longer knowing that it once knew more. And here arises a question that cannot be ignored. But what if we're not living after the first civilization, but after the 5th or 6th? Simply calling the past primitive because we don't remember who we used to be. If you enjoyed this video and would like me to dig even deeper, let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching until the end. Goodbye, everyone.